It's actually the people around the whole world logging onto Netflix last night to find not one, not two, but 3 episodes from the new Harry and Meghan documentary. And after years of speculation, we got to hear their side of the story, their relationship, and also what happens beyond the tabloid.
The banquet was supposed to display royal control, polished speeches, careful smiles, and not a single public sign of division. But behind the ceremony, Meghan's name suddenly entered a conversation nobody expected to escape the room. Palace aides later leaked the whispered exchange, and one sentence carried more danger than the rest. "She wants a way back in." What followed was not gossip. It was an argument about trust, access, and the future boundaries of the monarchy. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles had expected the private gathering after dinner to remain exactly that private. King Charles, Queen Camilla, William, Catherine, senior household officials, and a small diplomatic circle had moved into a restricted part of Buckingham Palace, where phones were absent and staff movement was tightly controlled. A state banquet is a formal royal dinner held for important guests, but the post-dinner conversation in this dramatized account was more personal. That difference mattered, because everyone assumed nothing said there would travel beyond the room. 2 palace aides later became the source of the leak. They had overheard senior household figures discussing a quiet attempt by Meghan to reopen a private channel to Charles through an intermediary. The message was not presented as a formal request for royal duties. William had already drawn that distinction clearly. Personal contact could be considered, but it would create no automatic return to titles, privileges, official roles, or institutional access. Charles heard Meghan's name and visibly stiffened. The king placed his glass down, looked toward William, and asked whether the approach had come directly from California. He did not condemn it. He did not defend it either. That hesitation revealed the conflict immediately. The father still felt the pull of family. The monarch had to think about consequences. William's reaction was colder. The prince was not disturbed simply because Meghan had reached out. He was worried that private reconciliation could slowly become an institutional question. Catherine noticed his jaw tighten before he said that family contact and royal access were 2 completely different things. The princess understood exactly why he chose those words so carefully. Then one senior courtier lowered his voice and said the sentence that would later dominate the leak. "She wants a way back in, but not necessarily through the front door." Camilla stopped speaking. The queen consort looked first at Charles, then at William. She knew the argument everyone believed had been contained was opening again. Before the evening ended, William asked one senior aide a final question. Who, exactly, had carried Meghan's message into the palace? The answer would shift the entire crisis from rumor to something far more personal. To the public, Meghan is one name attached to years of royal controversy. Inside this story, however, she represents something far more personal. To Charles, she is tied to a son he has struggled to reach. To William, she represents a boundary he believes cannot simply be erased. To Catherine, she is connected to wounds that became public before they could ever heal privately. And for Harry, every discussion about his wife becomes a judgment on the life he chose. Meghan had been physically removed from day-to-day royal life for years, yet her emotional presence never truly disappeared. The Sussex question, the continuing issue of Harry and Meghan's relationship with the monarchy, kept returning through interviews, family milestones, coronation memories, and private attempts at contact. Harry remained the crucial link. Prince Harry knew that any conversation about his wife would immediately become inseparable from his relationship with Charles, which made the leaked banquet exchange feel less like palace strategy and more like a judgment on his family. Charles felt that weight after the evening ended. The king sat alone with a brief note describing the attempted approach, read it twice, folded it once, and left it beside him. He could feel 2 instincts pulling against each other. The monarch wanted to protect the institution from another cycle of public conflict. The father understood that prolonged silence could harden into permanent estrangement, especially where Harry was concerned. William carried a different fear, The prince told Catherine he did not want another family conversation transformed into a constitutional problem. A constitutional issue, in simple terms, is a question affecting the monarchy's official role, authority, or public structure. Catherine listened before reminding him that refusing all communication had consequences too. She did not argue that forgiveness meant restoration. She argued that speaking privately did not automatically mean surrendering royal boundaries. William did not soften completely, but he heard the distinction. The leaked account suggested Meghan had not asked for a title, residence, or immediate ceremonial role. Her intermediary had sought something narrower: clarity on whether a private meeting with Charles could happen without press briefings, competing statements, or conditions being negotiated through separate households. That made the request more complicated, not less. Harry reacted badly when he learned palace officials had already been discussing institutional consequences. The Duke believed the contact would remain entirely between family members. For him, the internal debate confirmed an old fear. Once Meghan's name entered royal walls, nothing stayed merely personal. But the palace had not become defensive without reason. Weeks before the banquet, one private request had already reached William. His response had been immediate, controlled, and absolute. That closed-door moment, not the leaked whisper, was where the real boundary had first been drawn. Every royal rupture has a moment people later identify as the point where caution became resistance. In this story, it happened 3 weeks before the banquet. There were no cameras, no public statement, and no dramatic confrontation. Just one confidential request, delivered to a senior household official, and William's reaction when he learned what it contained. That private exchange explains why Meghan's name caused such an immediate change in temperature when it resurfaced during the state dinner. Meghan's intermediary had contacted a senior member of Charles's household with a specific request: a private face-to-face meeting between Meghan and the king before the end of the year, with no press briefing and no discussion of formal royal duties. An intermediary simply means a trusted person carrying a message between two sides. The request sounded personal, but because it involved a former working royal, it immediately raised questions about security, scheduling, and communications. That was how William's household became involved. William read the summary and set it flat on the table. The prince said a father could meet his son and daughter-in-law whenever he chose, but the institution could not allow one private meeting to be interpreted as the quiet restoration of old roles. His concern was not the conversation itself. It was what the meeting might appear to mean once other people learned it had happened. Charles reacted badly when he discovered the request had already moved through multiple household channels. The king told an advisor that family conversations should not require committee approval. A royal household, in this context, means the staff and offices supporting each senior royal's duties and communications. Charles felt trapped by the machinery around him. The monarch wanted to respond as a father, yet every personal decision seemed to acquire institutional consequences before he had even made it. One advisor suggested a compromise. Meghan could meet Charles at a private residence rather than Buckingham Palace or Windsor Castle. William immediately understood why location mattered. Meeting inside a major royal residence could be interpreted as a sign of official legitimacy, while a private setting would emphasize that the conversation belonged to family rather than the crown. Charles considered the idea. Then came the final condition. Meghan's intermediary asked that neither side later summarize the conversation publicly. That request alarmed officials because trust between the households had already been damaged. Nobody could guarantee that silence would hold forever. William believed the matter had been contained. Then, 3 weeks later, someone repeated part of that confidential request during the banquet. What had begun as one private meeting was suddenly sitting between Charles and William, like a challenge neither man could ignore. The most dangerous royal arguments are rarely loud. They happen in measured voices, behind doors designed to keep history from escaping. After the banquet, Charles asks William to remain behind. Catherine leaves first. Camilla is already gone. For several seconds, father and son say nothing. Then the king asks the question William had been expecting all evening. If she wants to speak to me privately, why must the crown be afraid of that? Charles closes the conversation down to just the two of them. The king and William move into a smaller reception room with no communications staff, no advisors, and no institutional buffer between them. A reception room, in royal terms, is a private space used for meetings and conversations rather than ceremony. That matters, because neither man can hide behind prepared language now. Charles believes a private conversation with Harry and Meghan can still remain a family matter. William believes years of blurred boundaries have made that almost impossible once royal property, staff, or official schedules become involved. Charles pushes first. The king asks whether William is truly protecting the monarchy or protecting himself from reopening wounds he has never forgiven. The prince pauses because the accusation lands harder than he expected. He knows his concern is institutional, but he also knows it is personal. Too much history sits underneath Meghan's name for him to pretend otherwise. William answers carefully. The future king says he will not stop Charles from speaking to Harry or Meghan. What he will resist is any situation where family reconciliation is interpreted as restoration of status. His voice remains controlled, but he pushes his chair back several inches. The movement betrays the emotion his words refuse to show. William wants a father to have his son. He does not want the crown to accidentally promise something it never agreed to give. Charles then reveals the detail William did not know. The monarch has already considered meeting Meghan privately. No date has been fixed, but permanent silence, he says, is no longer acceptable. William looks at him with genuine surprise. The conversation has progressed further than his household understood. Charles adds one condition: Meghan would not be received alone. Harry would be present, and the meeting would contain no discussion of becoming working royals again. That boundary changes everything. William does not veto the plan. Instead, the prince says the household needs one rule before the meeting happens. Private forgiveness must never be presented as public royal legitimacy. Charles agrees that someone must enforce that distinction. And suddenly the question is no longer whether the family will speak again. It is who has the authority to decide where reconciliation ends and the monarchy begins. Royal power is rarely exercised with slammed doors or shouted commands. More often, it appears as a line in a diary, a change of venue, a missing briefing, or one sentence from an official who knows where personal freedom ends and constitutional symbolism begins. After Charles and William clash, senior household figures confront the question everyone has been avoiding. If Meghan returns for a private family conversation, who decides what that return is allowed to mean? Charles receives the recommendation in writing. The king is told that any meeting with Harry and Meghan should take place at a private residence, remain absent from the court circular, involve no official photography, and create no expectation of future engagements. The court circular is the official record of senior royals' public duties, so keeping the meeting out of it would make one thing unmistakable. This would be family contact, not royal business. Charles reads the proposal twice before setting down his pen. William does not claim the right to control his father's private relationships. The prince knows he cannot tell Charles whom he may forgive, meet, or speak to. But as heir, he has a direct interest in the future structure of the monarchy, and that gives his position enormous weight. His concern is simple: a private door can open without reopening official status. Camilla agrees more than Charles wants to hear. The Queen Consort tells him that reconciliation may be emotionally necessary, but ambiguity is dangerous. If Meghan is seen entering a major royal residence, she warns, the public may interpret the setting itself as an institutional welcome. Charles immediately recognizes William's argument inside her words, and grows frustrated. Charles asks whether his entire family life must now be organized around how newspapers interpret a doorway. The king's voice remains quiet, but the irritation is unmistakable. Camilla does not answer at first. Her silence says enough. The monarchy has always understood that location, access, and ceremony carry meaning beyond private intention. Charles finally accepts the boundary. Meghan and Harry may meet him privately. Communication may resume. But the meeting will not restore working royal status, public duties, household access, ceremonial privilege, or any automatic path back into official life. That becomes the rule nobody can negotiate around. Charles believes the distinction will protect everyone. William believes it prevents emotional reconciliation from being confused with institutional restoration. Camilla believes it removes the dangerous gray area that has haunted every discussion since Meghan's message arrived. But the palace makes one fatal mistake. Harry and Meghan learn about the restrictions before Charles explains them personally. What was intended as reassurance reaches California sounding like a verdict. And suddenly, before the family conversation has even begun, the next rupture is already forming. For Harry, the most painful part is not the restriction itself. It is the order in which events unfold. Before his father calls, before any private meeting is arranged, and before Meghan has the chance to explain what she intended, the palace boundaries reach them through another channel. Suddenly, a request for conversation feels like a negotiation over status. Meghan goes quiet. Harry becomes angry. And the possibility of reconciliation begins to resemble the machinery that damaged trust in the first place. Harry receives a message summarizing the palace position. Private contact is possible, but there will be no official role, ceremonial restoration, or institutional change attached to it. Prince Harry recognizes the language immediately. A ceremonial restoration would mean returning someone to formal royal appearances or privileges they previously held. And that was not what he believed Meghan had requested. He hears household caution where he had expected family conversation, and the distinction immediately feels personal. Meghan reads the message beside him at the kitchen table. The Duchess of Sussex does not explode. She places Harry's phone face down and goes quiet. She tells him the conditions answer a question she never asked. Her original request, she insists, was for a confidential conversation with Charles, where years of hostility could be addressed without cameras, announcements, or negotiations over royal duties. Harry's anger rises faster. The Duke wants to call Charles immediately and demand to know why private contact was already being framed through restrictions. Meghan stops him. She tells him another furious call will only confirm the palace's worst assumptions about them. For once, she becomes the person urging restraint, and Harry reluctantly listens. Then Charles calls first. The king does not open with titles, security, or royal status. He asks one question: do Harry and Meghan genuinely want a private conversation, or has the intermediary misunderstood what they are asking for? Harry's tone changes immediately. He tells his father they want the conversation, but only if it begins as family rather than negotiation. Charles gives an answer Harry did not expect. The monarch says that is exactly why he wants any meeting kept outside official royal machinery. A household channel is simply the network of staff that manages schedules, security, and public communication, and Charles no longer wants that network defining what a father says to his son before they have even spoken. Harry goes quiet. For the first time, both men realize the leak may have exaggerated a disagreement they did not fully have. Charles then makes the next move himself. He tells Harry he wants one private conversation first, father to son, without aides, statements, or competing interpretations. And suddenly, the machinery falls away. What remains is far more difficult. Two men forced to decide whether the family fracture between them can survive honesty. The turning point arrives without ceremony. No banquet table, no courtier taking notes, no carefully balanced statement waiting to be approved. Charles and Harry speak privately, and for once neither man begins by defending his position. The king admits he is tired of hearing about his son through other people. Harry admits he is tired of interpreting silence as rejection. Meghan and William remain central to the tension, but this conversation finally stops treating family pain as a palace strategy. Charles makes sure there are no aides listening and no written agenda sitting between them. The king wants a conversation stripped of protocol, meaning the formal rules and procedures that usually shape royal communication. Harry agrees because almost every previous exchange has carried questions about press reaction, official status, or what one sentence might become once it leaves the room. This time, both men start from one clear point. Nobody is discussing a return to working royal duties. Harry hears something he did not expect next. Prince Harry listens, as his father admits that every attempt to reconnect now feels dangerous. Charles says he worries one wrong word could become another public rupture, another interview, another wave of accusations neither side can pull back. Harry is shaken because he has spent years interpreting that caution as emotional distance. For the first time, he hears fear beneath the silence. Harry answers with his own admission. The Duke says trust did not collapse on only one side. He refuses to distance himself from Meghan, but he acknowledges that public disclosures made private conversations harder to protect. Charles does not seize on the confession or use it as victory. The monarch simply listens, and that restraint changes the tone more than any apology could. Harry then asks Meghan to join briefly. The Duchess of Sussex speaks directly to Charles for several minutes. She does not ask about titles, status, residences, or ceremonial roles. Meghan tells the king she wanted the chance to clear away hostility without pretending the past never happened. Charles says he can accept that. He does not promise forgiveness. She does not demand it. That is enough to move them forward. Charles, Harry, and Meghan agree on a private meeting during a future suitable visit to Britain. It will happen at a non-ceremonial royal residence, meaning a setting chosen for family privacy rather than official symbolism. There will be no announcement, no photograph, and no promise of restored duties. The breakthrough is personal, not constitutional. But outside that private conversation, another force is already moving. The Banquet whisper is spreading beyond the palace. By morning, the family's fragile attempt at reconciliation will be front-page news, and William will be forced to defend a boundary the public has already started rewriting. By sunrise, the conversation that began in whispers has become impossible to contain. Broadcasters lead with Meghan's name. Commentators argue over whether the palace is reopening a door or locking it more carefully than before. Outside the gates, cameras gather in rows. Yet the most striking image is not a shouting pundit or a dramatic headline. It is the sudden contrast between a family trying to speak privately and a public desperate to interpret every movement as victory or defeat. The coverage expands within hours. Headlines focus on Meghan's attempt to reopen contact with Charles, while others emphasize William's insistence that private reconciliation must not become restoration of official status. Buckingham Palace refuses to discuss private family conversations or confirm whether any meeting is planned. Buckingham Palace, in this context, means the central royal household operation that handles official communication for the monarch. Charles has made the refusal deliberate. The king knows that publicly confirming the details would destroy the privacy he has just promised Harry. William enters a morning briefing and finds Meghan's photograph filling television screens. The prince lowers the volume instead of switching it off. Catherine notices immediately that something has changed in him. His frustration is no longer aimed only at Meghan or the Sussex question. He is angry that private household conversations escaped in the first place. The princess understands why that matters. If the palace cannot protect one confidential family discussion, then future reconciliation becomes harder before it even begins. Meghan reacts with unexpected restraint in California. The Duchess of Sussex watches the same coverage but declines to release an immediate statement. Harry wants to challenge several interpretations, suggesting she is seeking a formal royal return. Meghan stops him. She argues that silence is now the only convincing way to prove the request was about private communication rather than public advantage. Harry dislikes the headlines, but he accepts her reasoning. Outside Buckingham Palace, the spectacle becomes unavoidable. A cluster of spectators gathers behind the barriers, while television crews broadcast live. One newspaper held toward the cameras carries the enormous fictional headline, "A Way Back? Meghan Whisper Rocks Palace Dinner." Within hours, that image becomes the symbol of the crisis. William makes his own unexpected move. The future king tells aides that nobody is to brief publicly against Harry or Meghan over the proposed meeting. He still refuses blurred institutional roles, but he no longer wants personal reconciliation presented as surrender. The public believes the argument is about Meghan returning. Inside the family, Charles has reached a simpler conclusion. And after years of allowing headlines to define what every gesture means, the king is finally ready to state exactly what reconciliation will and will not change. In the end, the leaked whisper does not produce the royal comeback some imagined, nor the permanent rejection others expected. It produces something quieter and, for the people involved, more difficult. Boundaries without total estrangement. Charles chooses contact. William accepts that contact without surrendering his institutional concerns. Harry and Meghan accept that speaking again does not require returning to the positions they left behind. The scandal begins with the words, "a way back in," but its final meaning is entirely different. Charles settles the matter privately. The king confirms that when circumstances allow, he intends to meet Harry and Meghan as family, not as returning working royals. A working royal is a member of the family carrying out official duties on behalf of the crown. And that distinction now becomes the foundation of the agreement. Charles refuses to let institutional caution become a permanent substitute for human conversation. The monarch will protect the structure, but he will not use that structure as an excuse never to speak. William keeps his own boundary intact. The prince remains firm that reconciliation brings no automatic titles, engagements, residences, ceremonial roles, or official influence. Yet he also accepts something he had resisted emotionally. Charles does not need permission to repair a relationship with his younger son. The future king can protect the institution without controlling every private bond inside the family. Meghan receives something far less dramatic than a royal comeback. The Duchess of Sussex gains the possibility of being heard directly instead of filtered through advisors, headlines, and years of hostility. Her request is understood for what she intended it to be: an opening for communication, not an immediate campaign to reclaim status. Meghan does not get restoration. She gets a conversation. Harry feels the shift just as strongly. Prince Harry realizes that his father's caution was not identical to rejection. That understanding does not erase anger, mistrust, or the damage already done, but it changes the ground beneath them. He no longer needs one private meeting to settle every constitutional disagreement, and Charles no longer needs every family conversation to carry the weight of the crown. Charles closes the briefing folder after the final household discussion. The king does not sign another instruction. He simply tells the waiting aide that no further statement is required. The next conversation, he says, belongs to the family. That becomes the final verdict. The leak forced everyone to separate two questions that had been confused for years. Can Harry and Meghan have a personal relationship with the royal family, and will they automatically return to official royal life? The answer is clear. Yes to communication. No to automatic restoration. The crown does not move. William does not lose. Meghan does not reclaim her former role. Charles simply creates a narrow space where family can exist without pretending the past has disappeared. Reconciliation, in the end, is not a return. It is the decision to speak anyway. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.